Zzziwa Rhino Sanctuary is a story of miracle faith and the resilience to reintroduce the rhinoceros in the country, the pulsating race to save it from extinction against the ever-growing appetite for the rhino horn that feeds the contraband market, largely in the Far East. Two species of rhinos once majestically roamed the savannas and woodlands across Uganda's national parks. But poachers scoured and hunted down the rhino, setting up deadly wire snares. In central Uganda, a ravaging war in the treacherous jungles of Luwero pushed conservation to the back burners, resulting into the rhino's extinction in 1983. The dream to reintroduce the rhinoceros in Uganda kicked off in earnest in 1998 when the Rhino Fund Uganda was established.
And the purpose of creation of this body was to have the rhino population again increase. Then eventually it will be taken back to protected areas where they will be safely looked after.
After feasibility studies were conducted by rhino specialists, a 7,000-hectare breeding sanctuary for black and white rhinoceros was established at an expansive piece of grassland in Nakasongola district.
We needed somebody to give land for this kind of activity, for this kind of project. And in 2002, Captain Roy and Zzziwa Ranchers Limited agreed to offer land for the project. And this was put in writing. There was a land sales agreement that was developed between Rhino Fund Uganda and Zzziwa Ranchers, allowing Rhino Fund Uganda to use Zzziwa Ranchers land for a period of 30 years.
So we received 6 rhinos in total. The first rhino born from those 6 rhinos was in June of 2009. He was named Obama.
A tourist gem, Zzziwa Rhino Sanctuary had, by the time it was raided by machete-wielding men last week, grown by leaps and bounds as tourists visited in droves. The tourist site raked in dollars and transformed the area, which was once a backwater.
The existence of this sanctuary has given out employment opportunities to the community, and we get taxes from the visitors who visit the country, who visit this place.
The incident which led to its closure is part of the protracted fight to control Zzziwa Rhino Sanctuary, pitting the licensor of the land, businessman Captain Joy Charles Roy, and the current administrators of the sanctuary. The row has roped in President Museveni and the European Union head of delegation, Ambassador Attilio Pacifici, who has championed efforts to bankroll conservation across the country. According to a letter dated 16th October 2017 from the law firm Omongole and Company Advocates and addressed to the Executive Director of the Rhino Fund Uganda Limited, Angie Genad, it calls for the termination of the license. And I quote, "As you are well aware, Rhino Fund Uganda Limited entered into an agreement to grant a license with our clients, Zzziwa Ranchers Limited, Captain Joseph Charles Roy. In the said agreement, it was stated that the licensor, Zzziwa Ranchers Limited / Captain Charles Roy, would grant part of its 62 square kilometre of land comprised in leasehold and milo titles to the licensee, which is the Rhino Fund," partly reads a letter authored by the law firm. The letter reads further, and I quote, "Our client now wishes to give you notice of 2 years for termination of the license granted and revoke all activities of the licensee at the sanctuary. We therefore hereby give you 2 years notice period to terminate the said agreement as duly instructed by our clients."
We still had 15 more years to continue on the property. But all of a sudden, the landowner is telling you, vacate. Now, this was not received well on our part as managers of rhinos in Uganda.
The captain decided to write terminating that tenants agreement between him and D&D, which is the car company of Angela. And so Another letter was written also terminating the concession agreement with Rhino Fund Uganda, which is the organization running the rhinos, taking care of the rhinos.
On 28 January 2019, Omongoli and company advocates further wrote to the Rhino Fund Uganda executive director directing that they should vacate specific properties which were being illegally occupied. As per the concession agreement, the properties that the Rhino Fund Uganda occupies were not part of the agreement and were not to be occupied by yourselves. This is to notify yourselves to give vacant possession of the properties.
The government took over in January this year. Their license was revoked and it's in writing. And so what are they doing on my land? The only purpose for them being on my land was to look after the rhinos, which mandate was given to them by the government. And if the same government has taken over the looking after of those animals, there is absolutely no reason why they should be on the land anymore.
So we also seek clarification from Uganda Wildlife Authority whether we are still implementing the MOU. And indeed, Uganda Wildlife Authority confirmed that we are implementing the MOU.
Amongst the properties the Rhino Fund was accused of possessing illegally included a house occupied by the human resource, a house occupied by the executive director, 2 double rooms occupied by volunteers, the entire main store block, and the water pump borehole. In 2018, while speaking to NTV, Richard Omongole, who is the lawyer of Captain Roy, said that the administrators of the sanctuary were trying to grab Captain Roy's land.
The captain is denied any access to his property. Not his home. He has a home there. He's denied access to his home. He denied access to his 16,000 acres of land. And yet he had given just a small portion to her to build a lodge.
But the Rhino Fund claims that the businessman had reneged on a binding agreement. According to the terms of the agreement made on 20th August 2002 between Captain Roy and members of the Rhino Fund, which was drawn by Biencha Kika and company advocates, it was agreed that the licensor will allocate space on the farm to the licensee to establish infrastructure to run the sanctuary for a period of 30 years and subject to review every 10 years during the said term. This agreement was meant to expire in 2032 if the terms and the covenants were complied with. Amongst the terms of the deal, it was agreed that the allocation of such space shall not separate as a demise of the land to the licensee by way of lease, and the licensor shall at all material times be free and able to use the land so allocated for its farming activities in conjunction with the licensee. Amongst the covenants listed in the agreement, it was stated that the licensee agrees not to use the land allocated for any purpose other than as a rhino sanctuary by introducing rhinos within the carrying capacity of the farm and purposes ancillary thereto, except with the written consent of the licensor, which consent shall not be unreasonably held. Upon the threat of termination of the agreement, the Rhino Fund filed a suit in the High Court against Captain Roy, protesting what they felt was an arbitrary action devoid of the terms of the agreement. Speaking to NTV, the Rhino Fund Uganda board chairperson Vincent Opiene says the vacation order was a surprise to them. Hoping to find an amicable solution, President Museveni called a meeting at State House Entebbe in 2020 to mediate between the conflicting parties. There was a thaw in the relationship, and on 1st October 2020, the High Court entered a consent judgment between the Rhino Fund and Captain Roy. This consequently terminated the suit earlier on filed by the Rhino Fund. A new memorandum of understanding was signed between the parties on 18th September 2020 in the presence of the Tourism Minister Tom Butime. The MOU brought to an end the earlier on licensing agreement signed in 2002, whose term was meant to expire in 2032.
I think you has not done enough, because the moment they came in and the things had normalized, but that MOU ran only 4 months.
Under the new terms, it was agreed that the land where the sanctuary is situated, comprising of Milo and leasehold measuring 16,000 acres, belongs to Captain Roy, who by this MOU confirms to vesting it to Zzziwa Rhino and Wildlife Ranch Limited for management. And I quote, "The parties hereby agree, as advised by the President, to maintain and use the land for conservation and related compatible activities. The parties further agree to review the agreement after a period of 5 years from the date of signing of this MOU. Both parties hereby acknowledge that the rhinos at the sanctuary are a property of the government of Uganda," read the new agreement. The MOU also established a board of directors of the Rhino Fund consisting of 9 members. There would be representatives of Zzziwa Wildlife Ranch, which belongs to Captain Roy, 4 from the Rhino Fund as existing at the time of the signing of the MOU, and 2 representing government. One of the sticky issues that remained unresolved was in regard to revenue sharing. It had been resolved in the MOU that 20% of the gross revenue from the sanctuary activities, excluding donations, be paid to Captain Roy's Zzziwa Wildlife Ranch, and the larger share of the 80% of the gross revenue accruing from the sanctuary shall be used to run sanctuary operations and activities under the guidance of the board of directors of the Rhino Fund. But Opiene says that Zzziwa ranchers later demanded 100% of the revenue.
The MOU is clear on 20/80, 20 for yourselves, 80 for Rhino Sanctuary, Rhino Fund, but you are still insisting and saying you want 100% this time round. So we need a clarification on that before we move forward. Now, we then turn up for the next meeting, which was the last meeting they attended with us. When we came for the meeting, we were surprised that Captain Roy was in attendance in person with his lawyer, disagreed with us, and he said they are no longer implementing anything in the MOU, and they stormed out of the meeting.
Earlier on in 2010, Captain Roy, who is a retired pilot, gave a concession agreement to the executive director, Angela's husband, Nico Mark Jenard, to operate a lodge at the ranch called D&D International. Under the terms of the agreement, the Jenards were to pay Captain Roy 10% of revenues. But Roy later claimed that not a single shilling has been paid by D&D. Threatened by eviction in 2018, D&D International Uganda Limited filed a miscellaneous application before Jacqueline Lule, an arbitrator, seeking an interim measure of protection which was granted. Nick Mark Ginard, the director D&D Limited, which runs Amuka Lodge, on 6 February 2019, had requested for police deployment. Although we do have a valid interim measure of protection, several attempts have been made through the landlord to access the lodge and evict tourists, lodge management and staff, and take over possession of the lodge. Earlier on in 2019, Omongole and Company advocates on behalf of Captain Roy had authored a letter to the EU head of delegation. The letter, copied to the World Bank and the UNDP, cited a number of grievances, including an accusation that the European Union was conniving with the Rhino Fund and could be seen as a land grabber or perpetrators of violations of land property rights in Uganda. On 11th July 2019, the ambassador responded to then Tourism Minister Ephraim Kamuntu, expressing shock about the content of the letter, which he said was not couched in diplomatic prose, and the plank of the message he felt smacks of naivety. And I quote, I will not comment on the writer's lack of efforts to find a proper way to engage a diplomatic mission or on their noticeable lack of knowledge of the partnership between the government of Uganda and the European Union, which stipulates inter alia how the financing of development cooperation projects in Uganda takes place. I close quote. The envoy writes further, the writers also take the opportunity to lecture me about the violation of European Union property principles that a continued financing of the Rhino Fund Uganda would entail. At no stage during this process would I have ever imagined that someone could come to the point of cautioning the European Union from funding illegal activities in Uganda. All past efforts to support wildlife, national parks, forests, and conservation efforts in Uganda, both at policy level and on the ground, was done in partnership with the government to support its vision and objectives. The envoy implores government to do everything possible to preserve, consolidate, and further build on the success of the Zzziwa Rhino Sanctuary. The Nakasongola District Chairperson Sam Kigula has also written to the President imploring him to intervene in the matter and ensure that the sanctuary is not permanently closed. Opiene, who is a recipient of the prestigious 2018 Tasker Award for Conservation, says after the amendment of the Rhino Fund Uganda Constitution to allow the expansion of the board, the representatives of Zzziwa ranchers refused to attend a board meeting, saying it was illegal. Later on, the Director Conservation Uganda Wildlife Authority, John Makumbi, offered to mediate between the conflicting parties. Opieno says Zzziwa ranchers then made a new request asking for audit books of accounts for the last 5 years. About a fortnight ago, the mediation talks collapsed when Captain Roy, alongside his lawyer, stormed out of the meeting at UWA offices in Kampala and asked Rhino Fund to relocate the rhinos.
Because moving rhinos is not like moving cows, okay? It needs to be properly arranged. There are a lot of activities that happens on the sanctuary. There are a lot of precautions that need to be taken to ensure that the rhinos are safe. Every day there are people who are sitting with those rhinos and moving with them everywhere they move to ensure their security. Because we did not lose the rhinos way back just because of diseases that killed them. They were poached to extinction.
These people shouldn't be following the animals because they're dangerous. They were told not to. The government has taken over full security. There's who are rangers there, and they're efficient to do this work. These guys are squatters on my land. That's what they are now. They shouldn't be there. They don't have a legal status to be on that land. They should be gone, and gone very fast. Let them go and set something else. When these animals go away, when they are taken away to other places, that's where they should be.
And we said, but we have just signed a memorandum of understanding giving us powers to stay on the land and do rhino breeding for a period of 5 years. And all of a sudden you are telling us to move out of the land.
Where they are taking them, Action Falls, oh my God. God forbid. It is because here they have been tracking 24/7, tracking them, where are they? But where you leave them at a free range, oh my God. And the government has not been putting money there. Although they are saying animal belongs to the government. If you ask the government, how much have you been putting there? Zero. But the sanctuary, do you know that it has a world record in multiplication? World record. It has not been there. So meaning the environment here is more suitable elsewhere than elsewhere. So here, more suitable and security-wise, it has been so safe.
Barely an hour after the meeting, the sanctuary was raided by thugs who posed as tourists and later attacked the premises, destroying houses and tried to expel rangers from their homes. The Rhino Fund Uganda has filed a suit against the eviction and also received an interim order of injunction restraining Zzziwa ranchers from disrupting the breeding program.